Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Baruch Adonai Mitzion Shoichem Yerushalayim. Hallelujah. Baruch Adonai Mitzion Shoichem. Baruch Shem Kavod Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Amen v'Amen.
משפיע לכל חי רצון.
The demonstration was organized in order to protest against a possible decision by our government that would eliminate all those Jews who have converted according to halacha under the guidance of non-Orthodox rabbis from being recognized as Jews in this country. The status quo today allows for those who come to Israel from abroad, who've already been converted, to be recognized as Jews. And while we would like to enfranchise all those who have been converted by us, by our rabbis here in Israel, the change in law that's being proposed would not only not recognize those converts who convert here, but also would not recognize those who decide to move to Israel after they've been converted, after they have made a great effort to become part of the Jewish people. We're here to protest that particular possibility today.
Do you think today or tomorrow it will pass this new law?
Our great fear is that because of coalition politics in the Knesset, not because of anyone's sense of what is moral, what is just, or what is right according to Jewish law, that law will be changed and these people will be read out of the Jewish people in the state of Israel.
עליית נשים, עליית נשים.
אדוני היושב-ראש, אני מודה לך שאתה לשאול שאלה, והיא חשובה מאוד לאור הדברים חבר הכנסת סוקר אמר. חבר הכנסת סוקר, אתה אני מסכים שאין לי כוונה ואין לי רצון להוציא אותך את חבריך מכלל ישראל. להפך, אנחנו לא רוצים לרדת. האם אם אתה תבקש שיאפשר לך לגייר גויים שרוצים להיכנס לעם היהודי, ברור לך שאני אתנגד. ובכל זאת לא תאמר שאני מנסה להוציא אותך מכלל ישראל. מדוע אתה אומר את הדבר הזה על הרפורמי? הרי איננו רוצים להוציא אפילו יהודי אחד, גם אם הוא רפורמי, קונסרבטיבי. תפסיקו עם זה, הם כולם אחינו, אנחנו לא מכירים בקיומים שלהם, גם לא בשלך. טוב,
פוש שמח, זה מדינה יהודית, ואם מינו את הרבנות שהם יהיו אחראים על התורה, אז ממילא אני שמח מאוד שזה באמת קרה, שהיו בעד, שהיו באמת 53 בעד, וזה באמת מה שצריך להיות. שרק הרבנות החליטו מי יכול להיות גר, ולא כל אחד, לא כל איזה אחד אינטרסנטי שבעד כסף, הוא יחליט מי יהיה גר ומי לא יהיה גר.
אתה לא מסכים שרפורמיסט עושים את הגיוס?
כן, אני אגיד לך גם כן למה, שרפורמים הם סתם איכשהו לא עושים כלום, הם רוצים לעשות חיים, הם רוצים להרגיש טוב, הם רוצים להרגיש נוח, הם יהודים שרוצים להרגיש נוח, אז בשבת הם מגיעים עם האוטו שלהם ורואים שהכל זה איך שאומרים, הכל סיפורי בבלעות. הם גם כן מתחתנים, הם גם כן נוסעים לכל מיני, הם נמצאים בכל העולם, מתחתנים עם גויות ואין להם שום בעיה עם היהדות. מתי שזה נוח להם הם יהודים, מתי שזה לא נוח להם הם גויים. אז תבין, אז הרפורמה זה שום דבר.
שיסיים את הרעיון.
הרעיון החשוב. זאת אומרת, מה שאתם כוונת, את החוק הזה ככה עבר.
וזה באמת מה שהיה צריך להיות, ובעזרת השם אנחנו עברנו את זה.
תודה.
כל טוב.
עכשיו אתה מדבר?
כן, אני
טוב.
רפתולה, סיגבי לך, נו קומה רגע. די להגביר,
אני חושב שחוק ההמרה שהיה היום זה בהחלט דבר טוב לדתיים ודבר טוב לעם היהודי כולו. אברהם רביץ אמר פה למעלה שלא כל אחד, אנחנו לא מוציאים את אף אחד מכלל ישראל, כולם הם יהודים כשרים וטהורים, ואנחנו גם לא נגד הרפורמים, אנחנו רק נגד הגיור שלהם. וכמובן שהגיור שלהם זה נגד התורה ונגד דת ישראל. אבל כמובן שאנחנו לא נגד אף אחד, ולהפך, אנחנו שמחים בטור אחד עסקן באגודת ישראל שהחוק עבר, ברוך השם, ברוב של 51 קולות, ותודה רבה גם לאלו החילונים שמכבדים את הדת, כל הכבוד להם שהם היו בעד הגיור היהודי. ואני רוצה לסיים שבזכות הגיור אנחנו נזכה בקרוב לפסח כשר ושמח ולגאולה השלמה במהרה בימינו, ואדרבה, ויעשו כולם אגודה אחד לעשות רצונך ולבב שלם. תודה רבה, thank you very much.
תודה. אתה מאיזה מפלגה?
אגודת ישראל.
אגודת ישראל. תודה רבה.
You know how the religious Jews divide the world? They divide all the cosmos. Dead material, plants, animals that speak, Jews. This is the way they divide the cosmos into 5 parts. Dead material,
Yes.
Plants,
Yes.
Living creatures, cats, dog, fish,
Free.
animals which speak,
Animals. The goyim.
and Jews.
And last one. It's true.
Yeah. This is the way they see the universe.
It's written in Torah or something.
דומם, צומח, חי, מדבר, יהודי. What can I do? This is it. So they don't want peace, no peace. They have God and the religion, and that's it. Okay. And then you have the nationalists. The nationalists want all the country. Well, I'll give you the background. In 1800, all the Jews in the world were religious. To be Jewish meant to live according to the Jewish religion. And in 1800, 1800, 100% of all the Jews in the world were religious. In 1900, 100 years later, only 20% were Jewish. 20% were religious. 80% of the Jews in the world stopped being religious between 1800 and 1900. Most of the Jews in the Orient, I'm talking European Jews. If you talk Oriental Jews in Morocco, in the Yemen and so on, they remained religious. Until the First World War, most of the Jews in the Orient were still religious. But if you talk about Europe, Russia, Poland, etc., from 1800, when 100% were religious All the Jews were religious. In 1900, only 20% were religious. And Zionism came from the non-religious Jews. Zionism came from the non-religious Jews. Now, if you are a religious Jew, you know that you're Jewish. Because you have kasher, you have special dishes for milk and special dishes for meat, and you have 613 rules, 613 rules, what you have to do every day. It is not only a matter of prayer or going to the synagogue. There is much more than this. There is what you are allowed to eat, what you are allowed to dress. For example, you are not allowed to have clothes where the material is half animal and half vegetable. No, not allowed. Oh, no. It must be all animal, all wool, or must be all cotton. But you cannot have we cannot have 50% cotton, 50% wool. Why? Because some rabbi said that in the Bible. So there are many. What do I want to say? There are many rules which tell you small things of daily life. 613 rules. And if you live according to these 613 rules, which tell you what you're allowed to drink, what you're allowed to eat, what you're allowed to dress, when you're allowed to have sex, when you're not allowed to have sex, all these things, then you know you're Jewish. You don't have a problem. You don't have a problem. But what happens, the people who stop being religious have a problem. Because many of them want to call themselves Jews, but they no longer believe in the Jewish religion. And they have a problem. So there were at least 3 different groups in the Jewish thing. I say, if you look at it at a general context, not Jews, Papua New Guinea, the Hopi Indians in America, when they meet with modern capitalism, and they want the things of modern capitalism, they want television, but television doesn't come from Christianity, and it doesn't come from Judaism. It comes from atheistic Europe. And also the motor car, and also the aeroplane. All these are inventions of a completely different philosophy. If you want these things, it has an effect on the society. Then it is not just something which is made in a factory. Mm-hmm. This is basically, I look at it like fruit which goes on the tree. And the tree, the roots of the tree are Western philosophy. A non-religious philosophy, atheistic philosophy. And then you have the technology and so on, and this is the final product of a whole different way of looking at the world. Now, if people want to buy millions of these, and millions of video cameras, and millions of cars, a civilization which wants these things, they don't understand it, but these things, the car, the motor car, the aeroplane, the television, the radio, it changes their mentality, slowly, but gradually it changes, and many people stop believing in God, and this is the effect of Western capitalism, of European capitalism, everywhere on the planet. Wherever it can be in Papua New Guinea, it can be Japan, it can be the Jews, it can be the Hopi Indians of Arizona, or it can be the Bantu in South Africa. When they want these things, not everything is done by soldiers and by missionaries. If you want the things which the Western civilization produces, you gradually become influenced by the philosophy of Western. And the philosophy is non-religious. This is not a product of Western Christianity. These things are product of Isaac Newton, etc., who secular, atheistic. Okay. When this happened to a civilization, the civilization breaks into 3 parts. All over the world, the same story. 20% more or less conservatives, traditionalists. They say we don't have anything to do with the modern civilization. We want to be like 1,000 years ago. You have this in Japan. You have this in you have it in Papua New Guinea, you have it American Indians, wherever you go. So 20% want to remain with the tradition and no contact with the West. Another 20% say the old story is finished, we are changing and we have to become something different and new from what we were. In the middle are 60%. And these 60% say, no, we don't want to be like our grandparents. we also don't want to become like the others. We want to find some kind of a compromise in the middle. It takes some elements of the past and mix them with the present and then become a modern Jews, Hopi, Bantu, Japanese, etc. So Herzl thought that if they create a Jewish state, a Jewish country, the Jewish country will give an answer to this question. But the big question in the Jewish country, what makes the Jewish country Jewish? Everything here is, if the laws of the Jewish country were religious law, yes, then the country becomes Jewish. But but most of the people in Israel say, no, we don't want religious law here. According to religious law, if a husband died, the woman must bury the brother, all sorts of things. They don't want this. So you have a problem in the Jewish country, what makes the Jewish country Jewish? Because all the laws here are not religious laws. The laws of Israel are not religious laws. Of course, the religious people, from the very beginning, 100 years ago, were against Zionism. Because they said Zionism is leaving the God which is in heaven, and is making the Jewish people into a new God. And we are against this. The Jewish people must be the slaves of God, but they must not be God. And for the Zionists, there is no God. They don't believe in God, but the Jewish nation itself became the new God. So the religious Jews were anti-Zionist. All the religious Jews in the beginning were anti-Zionist. And they formed an organization to fight against Zionism. Okay, this is what they call the Orthodox. The ones who go according to the straight state, orthogonal, you know, in geometry, orthogonal. Orthodoxy means going according to the straight way. Now, originally, the religious Jews were anti-Zionist. For very good reason. From their point of view, they have a good reason. And the state of Israel was established by non-religious Jews. Zionism is not religious. So the question was, in 1948, Ben-Gurion didn't want to have a quarrel with the religious Jews. In Israel, there were about 20% of the Jews were religious, but they never participated in politics because they were against it. Everything that has to do with marriage, divorce, wedding, burial, will go in the state of Israel according to the religious Jewish laws. If you are a Jew, if you are a Muslim, it will go according to the religious Muslim laws. There will be no civil marriage. There will be no civil burial. Everything will go according with these matters. Marriage, divorce, burial will go according to Jewish religion. The holidays of the state of Israel will be the religious holidays, and in return, the Saturday will be the day of rest, and in return, you support the state of Israel and don't fight against Israel. And they said yes. They said, we agree. We agree. And from this day on, the religious Jews stopped fighting against Israel, the majority. There is still a few who are anti-Zionist and anti-Israeli. You know, there are people in Jerusalem who don't vote in the elections to the Israeli parliament because they say, this is not Jews, this is people who are against God and they cannot be Jews and we are against this. But 90% of the religious Jews, even if they are religious, today support Israel. And they formed political parties and they started to vote for parliament. In the beginning, whatever Ben-Gurion wanted, they did. As long as he gave them the Ministry of the Interior, where they can decide how much money goes to religious school, how much money goes there. From the war of 1967, many of the religious Jews became Zionists because they said, if Israel in the war conquered all Jerusalem and conquered all of Palestine, this is what God wants. The Jewish God is considered the man who plays the force which plays with history. History is a product in Christianity, no. But in Judaism, God is like a chess player who plays the game of history. So if the whole of Jerusalem belongs to the Israelis, and from the Jordan River to the sea belongs to Israel, then maybe this is what God wants. And they became Zionists. They changed. Okay, and now in the politics, they have 20% in the parliament. So you can say, if you want to look at the Israeli parliament, 120 people in the parliament. Is divided like this. 20% religious Jews. And from the remaining 80%, 40% are Social Democrats, Labour, and 40% are nationalists. So nobody can rule without who the religious support. The religious can decide who will be in the government. If they support Bibi, Netanyahu, then this party. If they support Peres, then the other party. And they support whoever gives them more. Now, in America, some of the Jews who are not religious, who had this big problem, what makes us Jewish, they took elements of the Jewish religion, bits and pieces of the Jewish religion, and created a reformed version of Judaism. But this is more for social reasons, that they can be Americans, but also feel that they are a little bit Jewish. And there is a big battle between the Orthodox, strongly religious Jews and the Reformed Jews. Because the Orthodox say, this is not Judaism, this is some kind of camouflage. And the Reformed say, no, this is a modern form of the Jewish religion. So they are always in battle. Many of these Reformed Jews give money to the State of Israel. They want the laws of marriage and divorce and burial to be changed. The Orthodox, who are here in the government, don't want it to be changed. And so they have a battle. They have a battle, for example, who is a Jew? The Orthodox say, somebody who converted to Judaism according to the traditional conversion, you have to go 6 months to a rabbi, you have to study, The Reform say, no, we can make somebody into a Jew in 3 days. So they always have battles between them. Every time the Reforms want to introduce some changes and modernization into the Israeli law, and the Orthodox are against it, and there you have a conflict. Of course, the Israeli government will always go with the Orthodox, because the Orthodox are 20% of the parliament, and everybody who wants them to vote to support the coalition government will go for them, and that's the whole story. And the Orthodox, although they are only 20%, have the stronger hand. They can bring down everybody else. First of all, they have a very clear definition of what it is to be a Jew, and they can show that this definition held also 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago. And the others, the Reformists, want to change, so they have a more difficult time. In Israel, they won't be able to introduce, to recognize Reform Judaism as Judaism. The Orthodox religious will never allow this. And they have the force. Most of the Israelis, I'm now talking Israelis, people who live in Israel, are citizens of the state, don't want the state to be religious at all. They don't want the state to be religious. They want civil marriage and divorce. It causes terrible tragedies to thousands of people. But the government cannot change the marriage. I'm not saying to make the religious marriage illegal. No, no. To give people the option to choose. You want to get married by civil law? Fine. The state will recognize the marriage. You want to get married by religious law? Fine. The state will. No. The Orthodox say never. Only religious law. No choice, no civil marriage. And the government cannot change. No political party can change. Because if they change this, they will not be in the government. The Orthodox will vote against it. That's the whole story. You know, the judge of the Supreme Court, his name is Cohen. Cohen is priest. According to the Orthodox law, if your name is Cohen, you come from a tradition of priest, you know, there are a lot of Jews are called Cohen or Levi. And these are originally the tribes which dealt with the religion, they were the priests. You're not allowed to marry a divorcee, a woman who was divorced. A rule. Somebody with the name Cohen, a Cohen cannot marry a divorcee. So the judge of the Supreme Court in Israel wanted to marry a woman and she was a divorcee. He had to go to Cyprus. He couldn't marry in Israel. And this happens all the time. Now, suppose people do marry and live together, but then let us say they die. The child is not considered a legitimate child of these parents because their wedding is illegitimate. So the child can have problems with inheriting. So you can imagine what happens. Many of the Jews who came now from Russia are married to Russian girls, Russian women. When they die, the Orthodox do not allow them to be buried in a Jewish hospital because they are not Jewish. And the monopoly over the business of burial is with the Orthodox Jews. So a lot of tragedies, and it will go on. It will go on until somebody has the courage to say all the honor to the religious Jews, but this is a state of non-religious law, the laws will be non-religious. If somebody wants to marry or be buried according to the religious tradition, fine, we accept it, but we also give non-religious burial and non-religious marriage. When somebody will have the courage, the problem will be solved. But the Orthodox Jews will do everything against it, everything they can against it. And that's the whole story. And the rest is daily tragedies. Look, most people don't understand what I've told you now. Most people don't know why this is so, what the problematic is. But this is all there is to it. It's all there is to it. It would be like in Papua New Guinea, if somebody dies, and the heads of the tribe do not want to bury that person in the cemetery because he became more Australian than Papua New Guinea. I say more or less the same thing. I don't know what the rules are there. But you know, they have the same problems. Many civilizations have the same problem. In Israel, immediately translated into politics. That's it.
You have Orthodox and Reformist and other.
Constructivist.
How is this?
I don't know enough about I think the constructionist, I don't know exactly the difference. I think the reforms want more to be more or less like the Christians, but instead of having the whole thing with the Christian religion, to have music in the church, for example. In Orthodox church, there's no music. You're not allowed music. But the reform wanted. I think the constructionists, I'm not sure, but I think the constructionists were the third group, only in America. They exist only in America. And they wanted to construct new things. The reformists dropped a lot of the old traditions. They dropped the kasher, not to mix meat and milk. They dropped this. And they drive to the synagogue on Saturday in a car, Ryuichi. You know what this means. On the Saturday, the Orthodox do not light a cigarette. Because they're not allowed to look at football, because this is considered work. The Orthodox are against football on Saturday. So, and the Reformists drive to the synagogue in a car, the Reformists. I don't know enough about the Constructivists, but my view is the Constructivists actually constructed a few new rules. The Reformists dropped, left alone, and kept. That's it.
And now in the Knesset, there are heavy debates.
Yes, there are debates, of course, because many of the Reform Jews give money from America and so on. And they built a college in Jerusalem and so on. But the Orthodox will not allow anything. If any Israeli government makes the slightest concession to Jewish Reform religion, the religious parties will not support that government, and the government will fall within 24 hours. So, that's it. The Reformists don't have one member of parliament. The religious Jews have almost 25 members of the Israeli parliament. They determine who will be in power. Today, I have here the paper. The rabbi, one of the rabbi of the Orthodox, Rabbi Ovadia, just today, by accident, Ryuichi, I found this, if I find it here. The Rabbi Ovadia, you know, he is the chief rabbi of the Oriental Jews. He said, the actors of the National Theater are clowns, and they will end in an electric chair in heaven. God will execute them. Because he says, you know, this we are talking about the National Theater, and so he says, the rabbi said, the actors of the National Theater, they are clowns, and they will end up on an electric chair, like in America, okay? And he said this in a conference, where he said, in the next world, after you die, when you go to heaven and judge, nobody wants to see actors. Actors is, no, nobody wants to see the actors. Nobody wants to see members of four groups. Liars, people who say bad things about other people, people who only say good things in order to win something, and actors. And all these, like people who play in the theater, all these people, liars, flatterers, and people who take life, and actors will all end up in the next world on an electric chair. One is not religious, the other one is religious. And the not religious Jew invites, the one who is not religious, invites the religious one to his home for a meal. They will never come, never. Why? Because they are not sure that the food you eat is okay according to the religion. Because according to their thing, you have to have complete separation between anything which has to do with milk and anything which has to do with meat. And they have completely two. You go to a religious home, everything is double. 2 sets of plates, 2 sets of dishes, knives, or forks, everything separate. If you had a steak in a meal, you cannot have a coffee with milk until 2 hours later. Must be 2 hours different. So if I invite somebody who has the religious to my house, he will not come. Because he is afraid that I will give him to drink in a cup in which, if a religious girl marries a non-religious man, she stops being religious. The religious people don't mind. You see, as if you're not religious, I can go into a home of a religious person. I don't mind. If they invite me, I go. I've been. There's not a, but he cannot come to me. You see? And living according to these 613 rules is very, very difficult. They call it to carry the burden of the Bible. And the others, they call the ones who are no longer willing to carry the burden of the belief of the Bible, and they threw away the belief, and now they are completely egoistic.
And I heard that it was a conflict about cheeseburger, no?
About?
Cheeseburger, hamburger.
Cheeseburger.
Because cheese is made by milk.
Yes.
And with...
yes. They have covered with cheeseburger. Then there are also all sorts of things which are not milk and not meat, ice cream. So the rabbis all the time make new rules. What can go with this and what can go with that. Crazy.
Ice cream is good or not?
What?
Ice cream is kosher?
Yeah. It depends. They send special inspectors into the factories to see how it is made. But if it is made without anything having to do with milk, then you can eat it in a meal where you had meat. So, you know that the Israeli government almost collapsed because an El Al airplane from New York arrived in the airport in Lod 5 minutes after the Saturday began. So the government almost collapsed. A war with Egypt, they attack Abdel Nasser, the war is a disaster, the government doesn't collapse. But the airplane from El Al comes 5 minutes late to Lod airport, the government almost collapsed. There were cases like this. Because El Al is owned by the government, right? The airline is owned by the government. If the food in El Al is not 100% kosher, the government will collapse. It's crazy. And they have inspectors everywhere. If you want a sign on the food, every food made in Israel has a sign kasher. And that means okay from a religious point of view. But only if the rabbis sent somebody to the factory, and the man was a rabbi, and he inspected how it is prepared, and he said, yes, the preparation process is okay. And they take a lot of money for this. There is a lot of money in the burial business. Millions. And there is a lot of money in the inspection of is it kosher, is it not kosher. I'm not saying they're doing it for the money. They are not. They genuinely believe in it. But there is also a little bit of money, little. You can't have a civilian burial. Huh? If a couple came from Russia, they married 30 years ago, she was not Jewish, she was Jewish, whatever it meant, and she died here, they can't bury her in a cemetery. You know, Yad Hana opened a place to bury such people.
I see.
Yes, Yad Hana has a place where they bury members of such couples. But what do you do with the body? And many people feel insulted by this, but they don't understand the history. The religious dominate in Israel. The Orthodox religious dominate everything which has to do with burial, with marriage, with divorce, and so on, and with food, kosher, and that's it. Of course, the reforms are much more lenient, but in Israel the reforms are nothing. Nothing. There are very few reformists. and the Orthodox have 20% of the parliament, members of parliament. And you know what? Much of this has to do with the identity business as we talked before, because there's many Israelis, not all, but many Israelis are afraid if there will be peace, they will not know what makes them Jewish. You see, they need the conflict in order to know who they are. Without the conflict, they become like everybody else, and people are afraid to lose their identity. Not the religious. The religious have their identity through the religion, but the unreligious, the 80% unreligious, have this anxiety that if everything, you know, they have people who don't have a secure sense of selfhood. And the thing they are most afraid of if somebody loves them. But if somebody loves them, they become together with the person and they don't know if they are. They prefer somebody who hates them because he defines them. He pushes them apart. So, if he hates me, then I must be something. So you have the same thing on a sociological scale. It's very sad.
Yeah, okay.
Jews had a very clear identity for 2,000 years. Very clear identity. The identity was based on the religion. Now, religion is not only what you pray, and all the Jews in the world, if they lived in Poland or if they lived in the Yemen, if they lived in Russia or if they lived in Morocco, all of them kept the same rules. They did not speak the same language. They did not speak Hebrew. Hebrew was a dead language. So the Jewish identity was not based on language. It was not based on history, because the Jews in Yemen had a different history from the Jews in Poland. But it was based on the religion. But after the French Revolution, in Europe, not in the Orient, not in Morocco, not in Iraq, not in Algeria, the Jews were allowed to leave the ghettos. Before, in Europe, in Christian Europe, the Jews had to live in special areas. The law said, you're not allowed to live there, you have to live here. But Napoleon had a revolution, there was a French Revolution, and Napoleon put new laws, Codex Napoleon, and then the Jews could move outside of the ghetto, and they started to see the new science, Newton, Descartes, and Leibniz, and many of the Jews stopped being religious. I'm not talking about the Jews in the Orient, because in the Orient, everything happened 100 years later. It went to be after. In the Jewish religion, not like Christianity and not like Islam, the ethnic component and the religious component go like this. In Islam, no. In Jewish religion, if you convert to Judaism, you become a member of the Jewish nation. In Christianity, if you convert to Christianity, you can be Japanese, you can be French, you can be Italian. In Judaism, if you convert to Judaism, you become the Jewish nation. So the Jewish nation is based on the religious component. The ethnic thing and the religious thing go together. Now, what happens if you stop believing? The two things, only one remains. And this one is insecure. So what happened to the Jewish people when they stopped from 1800, from after the French Revolution? About 20% remained religious, Orthodox, and they don't want to have anything to do with the modern world. About 5% or 10% said, we want to have some components, some elements of the old tradition, but we want to modernize it. And about 70% said, finished. The old story is finished. We want to become Americans, we want to become Germans, we want to become French. And they became assimilationists. They say, I want to forget the past. My parents, my grandparents were Jewish. I don't want to be Jewish. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't believe in the religion. I want to assimilate. So the people broke into three components. Isolationist, Orthodox. Assimilationist, let's forget all that. And in the middle you have adaptationist. Let us adapt the old thing to the modern world, etc. Now, when the Nazis came, obviously the Orthodox remain Orthodox, but the assimilationist cannot assimilate, because this is the anti-Semitic, the anti-Jewish people say, I don't want you. You want to become French? I don't want you. You want to become German? I don't want you. So the number of the assimilationists went down, and the number of the Zionists in the middle, the nationalists, grew. Now, the people in the middle, the Zionists, had a problem. I don't believe in the religion, so what makes me Jewish? What makes me Jewish? So, and the problem they have to this day, because there is no secular Jewishness. The religious don't have a problem. The assimilationists don't have a problem. But the one in the middle who want to remain Jewish without the religion have a problem. Because how can you remain Jewish without the religion? And the problem was the Zionist movement solved the problem in the following way. It said, okay, maybe we don't know exactly what it means to be Jewish, but there are people who hate Jews, like the Nazis, and they hate me, so they make me a Jew by their hatred. So what does it mean to be a Jew? They said, it means to be the victim of those who persecute me. So they have an identity which is based on persecution. An identity which is based on persecution, and all the time, they need basically somebody to persecute them. And they have a self-image of, we are the victims of history. Everybody always wants to persecute us. The religious don't say this, no? The religious say, we are the people of God, and we work God. The assimilationists don't want to hear about the whole thing. But the ones in the middle acquired a self-image of the eternal victim. I am the Jew, I'm a victim. And this is the Zionist. Now, this can sometimes become absurd, Ryuichi. Because, for example, I remember 4 or 5 years ago, an El Al aeroplane came to land in Lud. And before it landed at Lud, it went into birds. There were birds flying, and the airplane went into the birds, and the engines sucked the birds in, and all the blood was on the body of the airplane, okay? When the airplane landed in Lud, the journalist came and saw all the blood, and they said to the pilot, what happened? What is all this blood? And he told them that about the birds, that he flew into the birds, etc. The next day, the newspaper Ma'ariv put a headline. What was the headline? Birds attack El Al aeroplane. The birds attacked the aeroplane. Why? Because everything, we're always victims. Whatever happens, we are the victim. Even the birds attack us. We are always the victim. So once there were Israeli soldiers in Nablus, and they were behaving terribly. Golda Meir said, I hate the Arabs because they make our boys behave like animals. Even when they behave badly, they are the victim. The others made them behave badly. Okay, now if you have a self-image of a victim, you always need someone to persecute you. Now, suppose Israel, a child is born in 1970, okay? Nobody hates him because he's Jewish. Nobody hates him because he's Jewish. There are no people to hate him. He does not know that he is Jewish, not Jewish. He is Israeli. Mm-hmm. So what is emerging in Israel is a new identity, de facto, called Israeliness. Like in South Africa, the whites, in the beginning, they came from Holland, so they were Dutch, the languages like Holland, Dutch, etc. But after 100 years, 50 years, they became Afrikaner, and they have very little to do with Holland. Now here, the parallel of the Afrikaners is the Israeli. And there is an Israeliness, and the Israeliness doesn't feel a victim because nobody persecutes him, and he doesn't feel Jewish. Is a new thing shaped by the circumstances. But for Zionism, this is a disaster because they wanted to create a new Jew, a Jew who is not religious. Impossible. Impossible. To be Jewish is to be religious. If you leave the religion, you become something else, not something Jewish. Now, of course, the people who run the country mostly are still with the Zionist identity. So they're always the victims of everything. And when Palestinians throw stones on a bus in some settlement, they immediately feel that all the Arabs want to kill all the Jews. There are some Arabs who want to kill all the Jews, maybe 5%, maybe 10%. There are some Jews who want to kill all the Arabs, also maybe 5%, maybe 10%. But 90% of the Arabs want to live in peace with the Jews. 90% of the Arabs want to live in peace with the Jews. And I think that 90% of the Jews want to live in peace with the Arabs. But the way the mentality of the Jews is organized, that they are always the victims, if somebody throws a stone at a bus, you get a total panic already, affecting, I'm not saying everybody, but at least 50-60% of the population. And this very much contributes to the conflict. Because, you know, many of, for example, there were about 3 weeks ago, 2 or 3 people from Gaza who came to Jaffa threw stones on an Israeli bus in Jaffa, on some Jews. Here, you know, 5 kilometers from here. Jaffa was always full of Jews. Now, nobody's coming. Why? They're afraid. But what? There were 3 people 3 weeks ago who threw 2 stones. For this, you have to be, yes, they are afraid. And the Palestinians don't understand, because they never understood that the Zionists have a problem of self-identity, of self-image, that they don't know exactly what they are, and therefore a single stone creates much more problems than even a war. So the whole thing is very much related. And the Israelis always see that they're always the victim, always the victim. Not for everybody. The younger people say no. The younger people are different. But the younger people don't give the tone in this country. The Ministry of Education, for example, insists that we are all Jewish. There is no such thing as Israeliness. Now, but the young people don't feel Jewish. They don't know what it means if you don't live in the religion. So what does the Israeli government do? It takes the schools, the children in schools, in the top class of the high school, and it takes them to Poland, to Auschwitz, and shows them all the things in the camp in order to program them as victims. And the children get confused. And they are told, you see, these people died because they were Jewish, and look what, Jews are always persecuted. And then they don't know what they are, and then they come back here, but here they are not persecuted. So there is a confusion between Israeliness and Jewishness. But on the whole, as time goes on, Israelis will become, culturally, Israeliness will grow, and Jewishness will go down, secular Jewishness. If you are a religious Jew, but you know the religious Jews are anti-Zionist. Many of them oppose the state of Israel. They say a state which calls itself a Jewish state, but which does not have the laws of the religion, the laws of the state, and run by people like Barak and Peres and Ben-Gurion who are anti-religious, this is not a Jewish state. This is a blasphemy. And therefore many of them are against the state. They don't take passports, etc. And you know that in the Jewish religion there is a belief that God intervenes in history. Everything that happens here is a will of God. They have a big problem. What did God mean when he did Auschwitz? Why were 6 million Jews killed by the Nazis? If God does everything on earth, why did he do this? And you know what the answer is? Because of the Zionists. That the Zionists are Jews who stopped believing in God and went to create a new God, the Jewish state. And Auschwitz is the punishment of God for, this is what the religious say. And they're only 15% or something like this. So there are Zionists, there are religious Jews who are opposed to the state of Israel.
These people are provocative, nationalists have nothing to do with the Jewish people. All they want to do is provoke the Arabs. They don't have anything to do with religion, with Judaism, with anything Jewish, and we protest with every possible available jargon what they're doing, the way they incite the Arabs, they cause bloodshed, and we protest totally, and we despise the way their behavior is. Faithful Jews all over the world, religious Jews all over the world protest this despicable behavior of inciting the Arabs. These people are challenging God. The Jews have nothing against Arabs. There is no such thing as a Jewish-Arab conflict. There is a national Zionist and Arab conflict, and these people incite the Arabs. We want to live peacefully with the Arabs, and they have no right to move onto the mountain of God until Messiah comes. It is forbidden according to Jewish law to go up on the mountain. These people are not Jewish. They don't act like Jews, and they do not represent the Jewish people in any way, state, or form. Skult, S-C-U-L-T, Joshua. And we, faithful Jews, protest this despicable behavior of enticing the Arabs and causing violence and bloodshed for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It is forbidden of a Jew to go onto the Temple Mount until Messiah comes. These people are not Jewish and represent absolutely nothing Jewish or like Jewish at all.
Do you have some idea about the peace process?
The peace process will come when the Zionists realize that they have to give every single piece of land in order that we should live peacefully with the Arabs. That's when there will be peace.
Thank you.
Mashiach disagrees with you?
What?
What happens if Mashiach disagrees with you?
There is no such Mashiach that disagrees with me, sir. I'm sorry.
So you think that even if Mashiach disagrees with you would hold your position even against, if God sends his Mashiach, you would say
no,
that
God,
you would
God
disagree?
When God sends my Mashiach, all these people are going to be in real big trouble.
How do you know?
How do I know?
Yeah.
How do you? Because I know the
How
way.
do you know
I know
that what
because
you're saying
this
is
is
true?
Torah Moshe for the past 3,000 years, sir. That's right.
Right?
That's right. All these people are enticing the nations of the world and are causing Jewish bloodshed for no reason except for their nationalistic stupidity.
And during World War II, when the Orthodox community...
World War II and the Holocaust were caused and perpetrated by the Zionist movement.
Right? In World War II, the transfer agreement, when the Zionists agreed to have 60,000 Jews transferred here and go against the Nazi boycott, what would you have to say about that?
I represent the faithful Jews of Jerusalem, and we
don't speak for all the Jews, guy. Neither all the faithful Jews.
Yeah.
How? Who can speak for all the faithful Jews?
I can speak for all the faithful Jews.
Do you
yes.
speak for all Jews?
I speak for any Jew who believes in Torah Moshe and Yud Gimel
Oh,
That's
so
right.
For both
That's right. I'm a Jew. Right.
Oh, well,
you want to split up the Jewish people? I want to put them together. Jews are against violence. Jews are against enticing the Arabs.
You seem to be
this
splitting them
Zionist.
up by
This
saying
is
they're
Zionist
not Jews.
provocative. These people are hurting and fighting against the Jewish people.
Just for the record, this man represents only about 150 people.
That's right. And the truth is with the minority. That's right, sir. The truth has been with the minority, and the truth will always be with the minority.
Which minority do you represent?
The truth minority.
Oh, which truth is that, sir?
Keep your mouth shut, Roydif.
Excuse me, sir. What do you think is the solution to the problem here?
Put on Yitzchak Rabin.
Right, and you're next.
Yigal, hear what he's saying.
What's an adequate solution between the Arabs and the Jewish people?
Roydif means somebody who causes danger to any other Jew. And all these people are causing danger to the Jews by provoking the Arabs, and because of their stupid flags and megaphones, blood has to be spilled all over the land of Israel.
What do you believe is an adequate solution between the Arab and the Jewish people?
What?
An adequate solution between the Jewish and the Arab people.
Palestine be returned to the Arabs the way it was 1,000 years ago, and we will live faithfully and happily together with them in a Palestinian sovereign state.
I'm fighting against them.
He's a chilp. Zirim! Don't tell me what
אתה לא חייב להתאחד ככה.
אתה לא למד. להחזיר את הר הבית לערבים! להחזיר את הר הבית לערבים! זה להחזיר את הר הבית לערבים! פיקוח נפש תוכן כל התורה! להחזיר את הר הבית לערבים ולא למסור אותו בזה מדינה ציונית! להחזיר את כל הר הבית עם הכותל לערבים! אנחנו היינו בגלות 2,000 שנה ונשאר בגלות עד שמשיח יבוא! להחזיר את הר הבית עם הרוב היהודי, עם רחוב יפו, עם הכל, עם
יהודית! חתיכת ידיעות!
אתה מדבר איזה יהודי? אנחנו לא רוצים איזה יהודי אתה! איך אתה מגדל טרור ושקרן והולך
ביחד על ירדן!
אתה אריק שרון! תצאו חשוב לא תדבר פה, אני לא אתן לך לדבר. אריק שרון הוא לא משיח! אל תדבר. אריק שרון הוא לא משיח! אריק שרון הוא לא משיח! אריק שרון הוא לא משיח! להחזיר את הר הבית עם הכותל, עם הבית! אריק שרון הוא לא משיח! אריק שרון משיח ולא ברק ולא אף אחד! אנחנו נחיה בגלות עד שמשיח יבוא! והליצים האלה, הליצנים, המושחתים, המתגרים האלה, הם לא יגלו את הר הבית! הם לא יגלו את הר הבית! המשוגעים האלה לא יבנו את בית המקדש! המשוגעים האלה לא יבנו את בית המקדש! המשוגעים עד שמשיח יבוא! לא ציונים! אתה ליצן! אין מדינה! אין מדינה! זה פלסטין פה! זה פלסטין! אני לא פלסטין!
חלאת המין האנושי! חלאת המין האנושי אתה!
פלסטין פה!
סבל!
זה אנחנו רוצה לגור בירושלים! אל תיתנו להם! אל תיתנו להם!
One of the reasons that in Israel there is not a separation between state and religion, it's not because the electoral power of the religious. I don't believe that this relationship between state and religion in Israel is due to the fact that the religious are a strong electoral group in Israel. It's not true. Basically, from 48, and even before the birth of the new nation, I think that the Zionists had a problem to define themselves as a nation. Now, because the cultural basic that they have before historically was only religious, and they didn't want to admit it, they mobilized the blood. They mobilized the DNA to define their human group. But they knew subconsciously, they knew very well in some way, that it's only the religion that can be the basic to unify all the Jewish in the world. This is the reason that they couldn't separate state from religion, like in the liberal democracy in the modern age. Till today, 53 years after the birth of the state, there is any possibility to separate state from religion, because in the true history of the Jewish was only religious. You understand me? Now, with the archaeological discoveries today, it's very interesting. They show that the mythical origin was a legend. Now, for the Zionists, the Bible was how we say it in English, the proof that this land belonged to the Jewish as a nation. You understand? And suddenly, when they discover that everything is legend, it's too difficult to accept. Then you see, in history it was always, when the truth hurts, you deny the truth. Politically it was always, when the truth hurts, yeah, you deny the truth. In the public opinion in Israel, denied the discoveries in archaeology, but it doesn't finish yet. This debate doesn't finish yet. Who knows how it will be developed? It's depending on the young generation, the effect of these discussions with other cultural developed you see, we use history always to legitimize what we are doing today. This discovery is a part of this story. We don't have this legitimation. You understand that the story of the Bible is true. It can help maybe to liberalize a lot of things in Israel, and also to liberalize this belief, true belief, deep belief that everything belongs to us in this land. You understand that everything, especially to discover that the origin of the ancient Jew or the ancient Hebraic is Canaanian. It's important for this game of identity, of politics of identities that exists today in Israel. I'm not sure that I was clear enough, but it's very important for the politics of identity that will play in the Israeli consciousness in the years that are coming now. This new politics of identities. We are using always the past. You know, the past has a lot of future. Past has a lot of future because, you know, we will use the past in the future. And I believe that the past will be different. The past of the Jewish will be different in a few years. I mean, in the future. I will start with the beginning, very, very known. Israel, the Israeli state is defined as the state of the Jewish people even, okay? Now, we have to understand that most of the liberal democracy in the world, not only the liberal democracy, not only, define themselves as the states of their citizens, a state of citizens, that in the most of the part are dominated but with one big culture. I mean, I know that if I get a British passport, the British state is not interested in my origin. It's not the problem of the state, that I become a British. If I got the French citizenship, by the way, they say it nationality, they say in French, I become in all the meanings, French.
אריה דרעי המלך של עם ישראל! להתעורר! כולנו בשבילו! אנחנו כולם! מי זה בא? ראש הממשלה! מי זה בא? ראש הממשלה! מי המדינה? רבנו עובדיה! מורנו ורבנו! צדיק דורנו! יחי אדוננו מורנו ורבנו! צדיק דורנו! רבותיי, כל מי שלא חתם לבוא לחתום.
אבל בינינו זה יעזור במשהו?
תן לו לצלם, הם מחפשים את זה, תן לו לצלם. אריה אל תדאג, אריה אל תדאג, אריה העם איתך. אריה אל תדאג, אריה אל תדאג, אריה העם איתך. הם מפחדים מאריה, הם מפחדים. הדיבור קשה עליי מאוד. תסתכלו לנו בעיניים. הרי אתם יודעים שהוא חף כבוד ידידיי וחביביי, הרבנים הגאונים, כבוד ידידי וחביבי, הרב אריה דרעי, השם ישמרהו ויחייהו. יקיים עליו הפסוק, ואהבת את השם אלוהיך, שיש בשמיים ותאהב על ידיך. ותחנוע, ברוך, בנעימות, ידידי היקר ואריה, אל תירא ואל תחת.
כבר קיימים, ברוך השם, אותם רבבות, והילדים החדשים שאתם תוסיפו. כל אלה ביחד, כולנו כאיש אחד. שנזעק את הזעקה שכל יהודי זועק, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, שום חומות, שום סורגים לא יפרידו בינינו. אני יודע שקשה לכם, אני יודע שהדמעה בעיניים נעצרת בכוח, גם לי קשה, אבל יכולים לעצור את כל הזעקה הזו של השמע ישראל, השם אלוקינו, השם אחד.
Parallel to it, in the last weekend, Yediot Achronot, that is the most popular journal in the country, published a poll with a few questions. I will give a few examples of the questions to the supporters of Shas, only the supporters of Shas, you see. Now the question, the most important and the most interesting in this sondage was this: how you define yourself first of all, a Jew, an Israeli, or Oriental? The definition, the auto-definition of Jew got 93%. The definition of an Israeli, as an Israeli, 5, as Oriental, 1. Do you define yourself as a traditionalist? For example, 35%. As an Orthodox, 30%. As a religious, 22%. As a, how say it, non-religious, 13%. Anyway, the fact that 93% of the supporters of Shas prefer to define themselves as Jew and not Israelis, and not Oriental, is very scientific. It can give our a kind of intuition. What is the tendency, the major tendency in this phenomenon? They define themselves Jew. By the way, if you make it for all the people Jewish from Jewish origin in Israel, you got 20% that more or less that define themselves first of all as Israelis, or even much more. You understand? No, I think much more. I don't know today exactly, but anyway, 93 define themselves as Jew, only 5 define themselves as a Israeli. Now, the lower classes in Israel, most of them from Jewish Arab origin, or as they call themselves, Oriental origin, we see that the attitude of them is more or less, I'm not speaking about everybody, more or less for the right, for voices of the right that refuse any compromise. It's said that the Jewish Arab or the Oriental in Israel refuse to accept today a compromise, much more than the European part of the Israeli society. To define themselves as Jew and not as the Israelis is in some way, an expression of their attachment to religion, but it's not enough to explain this phenomenon. Not less important is the fact that they refuse to become Israelis because they want to keep their privilege that they have as Jewish in a Jewish state. In an Israeli state, their Jewish privilege are less sure to get it in a free competition of everybody. I mean, there is 1.5 million non-Jew in this country. The state don't define themselves as Jew. 1,100,000 of Arabs, 400 of immigrants from Europe that are not defined as Jew. In an Israeli society, that the state is for the citizens, they can lose a kind of their privilege that came from the law, from the general attitude, from the atmosphere. You understand me? I mean, the rich, the upper class are less afraid from this competition. They are afraid from the competition of Arabs in this new society after peace. I think it can explain why they define themselves as Jew, 93, not Israelis, as a first definition. If you will make the same poll in the upper classes, you will find other questions. You understand me? With this population, it's clear. They want to stay Jew because they get some privileges. Even if they are oppressed in the history of Israel, they were oppressed because they came from the Orient, because Zionism basically is a European movement. But they prefer to stay Jew. They don't want to define themselves as Oriental, because it can remind others that they are the Arab origins, culture, Arab origins. You understand me? Then this is the reason that in my analysis, I think that this part of the Israeli society, I can say clearly today, and it wasn't clear yesterday, that they are on the right of the Israeli society. From which point of view? They are on the right of the Israeli from the national point of view. They will support the right candidate. Till now, they played between right and left. About the peace, they were not clear. Today, it's clear. They are for the right, and I think it's not only from traditional point of view. I think it is for political point of view. They want to stay Jew in the Middle East, because to stay Jew in the Middle East is to have privileges that the Occident world are giving you. Oriental, Jewish Arab will continue to get the privilege that Israel is getting from the world as a European expression in the Middle East. They want to keep their privilege, first of all. In their discourse, they say that they don't have privilege, but you cannot compare this part of the Jewish Israeli society with the Palestinians, Israelis that are living here.
What do you think about some scholars are searching DNA of Jewish people? Yes, this is connecting, linking of all the questions.
Yeah. There are several attempts to seek an answer to the question: do Jews from different communities all over the world have something in common? Do they have a common ancestor? Does they all really represent the descendants of those Jews, children of Israel, who were living in this country over 2,000 years ago? Again, people are coming with different answers. I believe that on the one hand, we have enough proof to indicate that black Jews from Yemen and fair-haired Jews from Northern Europe have something in common which is not explained by any other reason rather than the fact that they belong to one nation originally back in history. At the same time, I think it's important to indicate that the Jewish people consists mainly of descendants of people who were converted to Judaism over the centuries. Judaism now is not a missionary religion, but it used to be a very effective and a very powerful converting missionary religion, which was seeking to convert pagans and mainly members of the Hellenistic culture all over the Mediterranean basin. At one point during the Roman Empire time, Jews represented 10% of the subjects, citizens of the Roman Empire, which at that time is estimated to have comprised of 10 million people. Now, most of these people were converts, were not the descendants of the children of Israel. And in Judaism, you don't have any discrimination or any barrier to conversion. You don't have any racial barrier or discrimination. So yes, we may be able to have some genetic answer to the question of the common origin of the Jewish people, but it's not going to go very far because we are converts. Most of us are converts. I know that in my blood, I'm sure that in my blood runs some blood from the Turkic Khazars, runs some blood from, I don't know, some Turkish and Hellenistic tribes, maybe German tribes in Europe, some blood of Canaanites, some blood of maybe Arabs. It's all mixed together. We are not a race, we are just a nation.
Okay, now I want to ask the question of Khazar. Yes. I heard that last year it was the first time memorial symposium held in Jerusalem. Yes?
Well, that was the colloquium organized by the Ben Tzvi Institute, which is a very important academic institute here in Jerusalem, named after our second president, who was himself a scholar and researcher of some aspects of the Khazar problem. For the first time, they have convened people, scholars, from all over the world, from the United States and Canada to Russia and Ukraine and the rest, and Israelis, of course, trying to share the research that is being conducted on the question of the Jewish Khazars and reach some guidelines and some understanding as to the next phases of research. Where do you need more excavations? Where do you need more linguistic studies, etc., etc. I believe that the significance of this colloquium was in the fact that people who are dealing with the Khazar issue and never met one another, although many of them know about each other's work, were able to converse freely together. Whether it's going to lead us any further in trying to solve this riddle of who were the Khazars, how come they became Jews, and where did they go?
How Israeli people accept this symposium?
It won quite a wide attention by the Israeli media, Israeli television, etc., which is not something very common when you deal with a very complex academic issue which belongs to the Middle Ages. But again, I have to tell you, people here are a bit shy. People here are a bit shy about the Khazar issue because it's very interesting, but if indeed some of the Khazars were integrated into East European Jewry, which means that many of us Western Ashkenazi Jews have some Turkic, Uyghur maybe, blood in us, then it sort of shatters the general division that you have amongst Jews, Sephardi, Oriental Jews, Western Jews, because then it means that Western Jews are indeed what we would call Sephardi Jews or something else, belonging also to an Asian race in this sense, the Turkic. So we need much more concrete proof to get people, I mean the average man on the street, really interested and going. And I think my dream is that one day we will find the tomb, the grave of one of the Khazar Jewish kings. And this will create such a sensation that will force everybody to take a look. Personally, I see the Khazar episode as the link of Israel to the Far East, because we can trace the Khazars. We know where they came from. They came originally from some part of present-day China. We know they belong to an Asian race. It changes the perspective in some way of Jewish history, although, admittedly, it is a marginal episode in our history. And since I'm accepting a priori that most Jews of today are descendants of converts or have a good dose of convert blood in their veins, then okay, then we have some Khazar blood as well. Doesn't change a thing. I believe it gives our history a wider scope. It makes the history of the formation of the Jewish people a much more fantastic tale than it already is. So personally, I'm interested, but I find it quite difficult sometimes to get people on the street interested.
When you made a TV program about Khazar, you received some contradiction or some people against this program, or not? Because I understand that this is one of the taboo until now to show this question.
There are some people, just like on whether the Bible is a myth or a record of history, you have very distinguished professors and very important rabbis and others who will say to you the whole story of the Khazars' conversion to Judaism is a fairy tale, never took place, it's just a fantastic romanticizing on the part of some Jews in the Middle Ages. It has no historic proof. One of the problems is that we don't have archaeological evidence which proves that the Khazars were indeed Jews. We didn't find a synagogue or a remains of Torah scroll, etc. Although some people feel that maybe we had. So there is a lot of opposition in academic circles, but I think this opposition has been eroding in the past 10-15 years since the collapse of the Soviet Union, because the accessibility of Khazar sites in Russia, the accessibility of Russian libraries and archives has made it possible for many Israeli scholars to go there and check for themselves at least some aspects of the question. So they tend to regard it less as a theory and more as a scientific challenge. I cannot ignore the fact, and I think no one can ignore the fact, that when you go, you check family names of people Jews who were exterminated by the Nazis in Europe. You can trace many of the names to the Khazar period, Khazar names, Khazar areas at the time of the Khazar Empire. Oh, many. You have many names of Jews in Eastern Europe who died in the gas chambers, who were Turkic names that they got maybe from the Khazars, maybe from the Kipchaks, but most probably from the Khazars. More than that, the language, which the Yiddish that the Jews who died in the extermination camps were speaking, has a lot of words which came to this Jewish language, Jewish European language, from the Khazars. I'll give you an example. Many of the words which are used in Yiddish to describe the sex organs and other functions of the body, some diseases, came to East European Yiddish from the Khazar empires. They were originally Greek words from the Pontic coast, from the Black Sea coast of present-day Turkey. And when the Jews there were chased out by the Byzantine Empire, they fled, and we know it from historical sources, to the Khazar Empire, that was Jewish at the time, and afterwards moved into Eastern Europe. The most important word in Yiddish is to daven. To daven means to pray to God in a synagogue. There is no linguistic explanation to how this term came into Yiddish except through the Khazars. So the people who died at the extermination camps spoke a language which contained a lot of words, which were derived from the Khazars or came via the Khazar territory. Daven, to pray. Many other words, to go to toilet, to go to the toilet, is from Khazar. Hemorrhoids, the disease, from Khazars. In this language came from Khazars. The male sexual organ is from Khazar. A lot of it.
These things was discussing in that symposium?
Oh yeah, in that symposium we had a beautiful, stimulating discussion between two important Israeli linguists who were actually fighting each other very gently over the question of the linguistic origin of the East European language Yiddish. One was Professor Paul Wexler from Tel Aviv University, who wrote a fantastic book which is rejected by most scholars, but it makes for a fantastic reading. And Wexler, who is in Tel Aviv, charming fellow, wrote a book, The Ashkenazi Jews, a Slavo-Turkic nation in search of identity, based on a linguistic analysis and assessment of the language spoken by those who were exterminated at the gas chambers. Against him was another friend of mine, Professor Moscovich from Jerusalem, who said no, there is a different explanation. There is a different explanation to how the language was formed, which doesn't have to take into account the Khazars. It was a fantastic debate. To me, it was the highlight of the whole colloquium. The book of Wexler is fantastic. Fantastic. Maybe absolutely untrue, but as an intellectual, I don't know. I'm not a linguist. I'm a political analyst. But as a reading, fantastic, stimulating intellectual exercise of the first degree. I read the book 3 times. I gave it to my daughter, who is not interested in the subject, and she was, because it tries to give you a different approach altogether to the formation of the Jewish people and post-biblical times. And it's very challenging. It's very challenging. I believe if we dig more in the Kazakh territory and we find some more evidence, it can have a huge impact on how Jews view themselves and therefore how they view their surrounding. To me, politically, it's a very healthy process. And I'll give you an example. I think it was very important for Israel to bring the Ethiopian Jews. For our perception, to bring the Ethiopian black Jews, and they are part of our nation. The Cochin, the Indian Jews, etc. The same way, it's very important to establish that Judaism also have a component which is Far Eastern. In this case, Altaic, Turkic, whatever it was, and expand the view of who we are.
Okay, can you describe about Palestinian movement, new movement?
Well, amongst the Palestinians, for example, now you have a new cultural movement which is sponsored by the Palestinian political leadership to claim that Palestinians are not merely Arabs, but that they are the true descendants of the people who were living in this country before the children of Israel came here in biblical times, that is the Canaanites. And what they do is they have a lot of research going into this. They have festivals, popular festivals, in which people pose in whatever they think were the Canaanite costumes and chariots and the gods of the Canaanites, etc. And now they are arguing with Israeli archaeologists, because everything that you find in excavations, the Palestinian archaeologists tend to say, this is Canaanite, it's not Jewish, doesn't belong to the Jewish period, it's pre-Jewish period, etc. It's a fight over history, which is indeed a fight over the future. By trying to adopt the Canaanite culture, the Palestinians are basically trying to say, we were here before the Jews. We did not come here in the 7th century with the Muslim armies. So it has a very important, significant, contemporary connotation.
But how about the relation of idea of promised land? Zionism, promised land, and these ideas can be changed?
Well,
no.
Well, this is the point. The point is that people believe, and it's not just that they believe, they feel very strongly that this is the promised land, that whether you are, if you are a religious Jew, then there is no question about it. It's God's promise to the Jewish people that this is the promised land, and you don't have to argue about it. If, like me, you are not a religious Jew, then we all know, all of us secular Jews, that this is the land where our people was formed over 3,000 years ago, that this is the land to which our ancestors and forefathers were praying in the diaspora for 2,000 years. It doesn't take any archaeological proof for us, for me, for somebody to come and say, yes, I have or I don't have an archaeological supporting evidence for you. We don't need it. This is the land. You open a Jewish prayer book, it's there. You open every single Jewish manuscript from the Middle Ages and before, the Promised Land is there. It's something that the Jewish people has as part of their belief, not only in the religious sense, but also as part of their sentiment as a nation.
I'm writing a book now that I try to explain the Jewish in history are not how we say it, a race, a people race, a nation. After the destruction of the temple in 70, it wasn't exile of the people that live in Judah here. It wasn't an exile. A lot of people were killed in the revolt, you know. But, you know, the story that with the destruction of the temple, it was the exile of the Jew, it's a legend, it was a myth, that started with the Christians, the first Christian. They started to say, you see this Jew, because of the fact that they didn't accept Jesus Christ, God punished them and sent them away.